I want to go on to a question about the domestic economy and the budget which we've got here. We've talked about changes to pensioners and all that, but this one's going to affect everybody. Jennifer Gracie has the question. Jennifer Gracie.
How can a 3p increase in fuel duty be justified when rural businesses and families are already struggling to keep moving?
How can a 3p increase? This is the increase in fuel prices that the Chancellor's imposing in August. How can you justify it when rural businesses and families are struggling to keep moving? I think it costs something between £35 and £40 a year. Michael Forsyth, do you think government's got it right? Don't say, oh God, that answers the question.
No, I think the tax burden in our country is far too high. The state is spending nearly 50% of our GDP. We are living beyond our means. We talk about reducing the deficit. When we talk about reducing the deficit, we're talking about actually cutting the rate at which the debt is increasing. In 5 years' time, our national debt will have gone up from 1 trillion to 1.5 trillion. So we are living beyond our means, and we are taxing too highly, and that is why we're not getting growth, because the businesses, the small businesses, simply haven't got the money. And to my mind, putting up fuel duty, it all adds, it puts up prices in the shops, it adds the cost of going to work. It's not a sensible basis on which to proceed. So I very much hope that the Chancellor will think of not going ahead with that proposal.
Joanne Lamont. Why is that interesting? When we had a Chancellor, he was always called Lamont rather, and you're called Lamont, which I know is the Scottish pronunciation. Why did he call himself Lamont?
Well, why did you have a Scot called Lamont who was a Tory? I don't know that either, so I don't know.
Right, leave the pronunciation. Let's go back to the fuel duty. Are you in favour of it?
You were suggesting whether the Chancellor should think about these things again. He's also got a record of thinking again, so we maybe have some optimism in that. And I think the message really is that when you're making budget decisions, you almost have to test them against proper sense of consequences. It may be this would be a way of balancing your budget, but if there are direct consequences for rural communities and rural businesses who actually then affect growth and so on, then I think you have a real problem. And of course our position has been that we don't have a budget for growth at all, and their drive on austerity, despite the fact that David Cameron's prepared to lecture the rest of Europe about the need for growth, he himself in his own budget has caused major problems. So I think that the test is what are the consequences of it, and they need to be listening to rural businesses in the same way as in the Western Isles, for example. The decision of the SNP to withdraw RET for businesses is having an impact there in the fragile communities. You really need to think through what your budget choices are.
Okay, we had quite a lot of questions about fuels. I'd like to hear from anybody who wants to talk. Yes, you sir.
I think the lady has done very well to avoid the question there, if I may say so. The fact is, if Labour had been in power, petrol will be much more now than it will be even if Osborne puts the 3p on.
Melanie Phillips.
Well, I think that the increase in fuel duty is absolute madness for the reasons that have been already said. I mean, the country needs desperately to become more competitive, and this is another way of ensuring that doesn't happen. But to my way of thinking, what makes it even more ludicrous is that it's kind of got a halo of justification around it, this fuel duty, on the basis that we all know that petrol is evil, because we all know that we have to bring down our carbon emissions. This country is making its own, to put it mildly, a noose for its own neck by an absolutely suicidal environmental policy, which commits us to reduce carbon emissions, in the cause of which the hard-pressed British public is being hammered by fuel duty, all in pursuit of a theory of man-made global warming, which is itself a total sham.
So nothing to do with the Treasury, or any of that?
The Treasury is simply trying to raise money by whatever means it can, and it thinks it can get away with it on the basis that it can appeal to green sensibilities, which are bogus.
All right. The man in the very back row, the person in the very back row in blue.
Yes. Do you think that areas like the Highlands should be exempt from tax duty from fuel?
Charles Kennedy, do you think places should be exempt?
You know, that would be a lovely scenario. I don't think it's going to happen. Although this part of the country, along with the Scilly Isles, the island communities are experiencing, just started recently, a derogation or a reduction in petrol prices. Now, this has been all but wiped out, of course, by what's been happening at the pump almost the very week it was introduced. But we're trying out a pilot scheme, which some of us have lobbied for over 20 years. When we first... this
3p is going to more or less...
No, absolutely point taken, and I can assure you these are some of the arguments that are raging in and around the coalition at the moment. But this was de facto for many years in other European member states. The Treasury, under successive governments, Conservative and Labour, wouldn't touch it, wouldn't embrace it, because civil servants at a European level, just as at a UK or indeed I dare say at a Scottish level, hate variations and derogations from the norm. We've actually broken through that barrier, so I think the government of Westminster deserve credit. But at the very time that we've broken through it, albeit in a pilot scheme, and let's see how it works, and let's hope we can extend it to the mainland in due course, of course, that's been completely thrown out of kilter by the other rises that are now due to go through. Hence the big campaign, and hence the fact that many of us who are sympathetic to the economic plight that the government finds itself in are nonetheless trying to make a rational argument for looking for other ways of attracting income.
All right. Where would you go for it if you were Chancellor?
I don't know. I'm very glad I'm not the Chancellor. I'm honestly saying. I'm not a flippant
Some of the richest people in this country are private equity people. They are paid through a mechanism called carry. So they're being paid very huge sums of money. And they're paying tax at a rate of less than 10% in some cases on that. So there are areas where the government can go for revenue. Personally, I think the tax burden is too high, and we need to reduce it in order to get growth. And I believe that given the opportunity, the private sector will take advantage of that. But there are areas. There are also people who are turning their businesses from limited liability companies into partnerships in order to avoid national insurance.
There's also a promise in the Tory manifesto which followed the SNP example, which said if the international price of oil goes up, taxation should then go down to stabilise fuel prices, and if the reverse happens again you do the same, so that you have stable fuel prices. This GDP is utter madness and should be the next U-turn, and they should take to their manifesto promise to introduce the fuel regulator that would actually stabilise fuel prices. And it's not just the price of fuel, the air passenger duty increase is also going to destroy many aspects of tourism in Scotland as well.
Okay, let's just stick with the man in the pink shirt there. You, sir, and then I come across.
Many parts of the economy in the Highlands especially are tourism based, and with this high fuel costs, they are going to be at a huge disadvantage. Therefore, the UK invisible exports will suffer. We need a growth agenda very, very fast, right? Especially in the rural economy.
And the 3p?
It's one thing that could help, including a reduction in VAT for hospitality.